Linda, my wife of a decade, was waiting for me when I arrived home from work on a seemingly ordinary Wednesday evening. With a serious expression, she motioned for me to join her at the dining table, indicating we needed to have a crucial discussion. My heart sank. History had taught me that such talks rarely boded well. As I settled into my chair, bracing myself, Linda began with a declaration of her love for me, emphasizing her commitment to our marriage. Despite her reassuring words, a sense of foreboding washed over me. I met her gaze, urging her to continue. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Linda dropped a bombshell. She had decided to take a lover. Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. I was completely blindsided and frankly outraged. Struggling to maintain my composure, I confronted her. "So, you claim to love me, you don't want to harm our relationship, yet you want to be with someone else?" My voice was tinged with disbelief and anger. Linda, trying to soften the harshness of the situation, admitted candidly that she had indeed met someone she desired physically. This would be a sporadic affair, she explained, promising complete transparency about it. She believed her love for me was strong enough to prevent any emotional interference in our marriage. Moreover, she suggested that if my love matched hers in depth, I should understand and accept her need for this experience. Her rationale bewildered me. I couldn't fathom how she could consider such an action harmless to our relationship. In a mix of shock and curiosity, I inquired whether plans with her newfound lover were already in place. Linda confidently confirmed that they were tentatively arranging a weekend getaway the following week. In a bid to gauge her perspective, I posed a hypothetical question. How would she react if I proposed a similar arrangement? I watched as she processed the question, certain she wouldn't respond honestly. In my heart, I knew she would be incensed if the roles were reversed. Yet, she claimed she would be understanding, provided I reassured her of my unwavering commitment to our marriage. Her response infuriated me. I couldn't help but call out her hypocrisy, expressing my disbelief at her apparent double standard. Caught off guard by my accusation, Linda was visibly shaken. She admitted she hadn't anticipated my anger, assuming my love for her would override any objections to her desires. Linda's proposal left me reeling, and I couldn't hide my incredulity. "What were you thinking?" I exclaimed, hardly able to believe what I was hearing. "Did you honestly expect me to agree to this? To just sit back and wait while you're off with another man?" I was baffled and hurt by her lack of consideration for my feelings. She hesitated, then admitted her oversight. "Maybe I didn't think everything through," she conceded, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "That's an understatement," I retorted sharply. I pressed her further, needing to know the extent of her resolve. "If I say no, will you still go ahead with your plan?" Linda's response was hesitant, a clear sign she hadn't anticipated my resistance. I didn't really think you would refuse," she admitted. Her lack of foresight was astounding. I needed time to process this bombshell. "I need a few days to think about this," I said firmly. "Let's revisit this discussion on Sunday. I need time to sort through my thoughts." Without another word, I retreated to our bedroom, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. In a symbolic act of distancing, I began moving my belongings to the guest room. Linda's confusion was evident. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice tinged with surprise. "I can't share a bed with you right now," I replied curtly, my voice heavy with emotion. "Not when your thoughts are clearly with someone else." With that, I closed the door behind me, isolating myself in the guest room. That sleepless night, I formulated a plan. The harsh reality hit me. If Linda went through with her intention, our marriage was over. The next morning, I left the house without a word to Linda and called in at work, requesting a couple of days off for personal reasons. My first stop was to purchase 3 voice-activated recorders, one for near the phone, one for the bedroom, and one for Linda's car. I also acquired a phone tap recorder and installed it on our home phone line. Then, I visited our cell phone provider. Being the primary account holder for Linda's phone, I had no issue obtaining her phone records. While Linda was at work, I took the opportunity to access her email accounts. I discovered a new account I wasn't aware of, but fortunately, the password was easy to guess. Inside, I found a wealth of information, although, to my slight relief, it appeared she hadn't been unfaithful yet. I set up a forwarder to send all emails from that account to me discreetly. The final piece of my plan was to purchase a pair of GPS locators. As I set these measures in place, a mix of sadness, anger, and determination settled over me. The upcoming Sunday conversation loomed large in my thoughts, a decisive moment for the future of our marriage. The GPS devices I purchased were notably small and easily concealable. My plan was to place one in Linda's billfold, a place she was sure to always carry with her, given it held her cash and credit cards. The other would be discreetly installed in her car. I had a lot to accomplish that day, but my arrangements were meticulously lined up to keep a close watch on her activities. The only remaining task was to access her cell phone to check for any messages, a task I hoped to undertake that evening while also planting the GPS devices. Upon reviewing her emails, I discovered a series of exchanges between Linda and Frank Jones, a co-worker of hers. These emails confirmed that their planned rendezvous for the upcoming weekend was definite. Regardless of my response, their plans were set in motion. Frank Jones had unwittingly made himself a target of my wrath, having intruded into my life and marriage. Determined to protect my interests, I consulted a highly recommended divorce lawyer on Friday. I instructed him to initiate divorce proceedings, citing adultery as the cause, with Frank Jones explicitly named as the other party. I expressed my desire to sue Frank for his role in this debacle. My lawyer was confident, especially after I presented him with the emails, phone records, and the promise of forthcoming audio recordings. He agreed to begin the process immediately. When Linda returned home that evening, I couldn't bring myself to interact with her. I avoided any conversation and left to dine alone at a bar, seeking solitude and the numbing company of a few beers. Upon my return, despite Linda's attempt to engage, I walked past her and shut myself in the guest room, signaling my unwillingness to communicate. The tension between us remained palpable throughout the weekend. It wasn't until Sunday afternoon that I decided it was time to confront the issue head-on. We sat down in the kitchen to have the unavoidable discussion. I started the conversation, my voice heavy with emotion. "You must have realized by now how unhappy I am with your proposition," I began. "I've thought about it extensively, and there's simply no way I can be okay with it. You claimed it wouldn't affect our marriage, but look around. It already has, and the impact is deeply negative." Linda could see the anger and hurt written all over my face, a clear indication of how deeply her actions had already damaged our relationship. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and it was evident that the future of our marriage hung precariously in the balance. Linda attempted to justify her stance. "If you had considered my point of view, maybe you'd be more receptive," she suggested. I had indeed pondered over her perspective, but found no merit in it. "I tried to see it from your angle, but I can't find any way that this could be positive for us. So, my answer is a firm no," I replied, my tone resolute. "How can you be so selfish?" Linda retorted, her frustration evident. I couldn't help but feel that her accusation was misplaced. "Selfish? It seems to me that wanting to sleep with someone else while being married is the epitome of selfishness," I countered. "And what if I do it anyway?" she challenged. "The consequences will be severe for any extramarital affair. We made vows to each other 10 years ago, promising exclusivity," I reminded her firmly. Linda seemed unmoved. "I know, but I feel I have to do this," she insisted. With that, the conversation reached a dead end. I left the house, feeling a mix of anger and resignation. I found a Wi-Fi spot and began monitoring their email exchanges. Linda's emails conveyed her determination to proceed with her plans despite my objections. Frank had already booked room 125 at the Hilton in Kansas City for their rendezvous. I swiftly reserved the same room for the night before their arrival, intending to set up surveillance equipment. Their plans included a romantic Saturday evening with dinner, dancing, and what they anticipated would be a passionate night. Linda even mentioned purchasing new lingerie specifically for the occasion. As I observed their planning, their disregard for my feelings was painfully clear. They planned to check in at 3 p.m. on Friday, with Frank picking Linda up from our house at 1 p.m. for the 2-hour drive. This detail caught me off guard. He was bold enough to pick her up from our shared home. I reserved a nearby room for the weekend to ensure I could capture everything. In preparation, I acquired small fibre optic HD video cameras, planning to install them discreetly in the room on Thursday. This footage would serve as crucial evidence in my impending divorce filing. I maintained a cold silence towards Linda in the following days, but Wednesday was set to be the decisive day. I intended to give her one final chance to reconsider. If she chose Frank over our marriage, it would be the end for us. I asked her to sit down at the table for a crucial conversation. Her expression was anything but hopeful as we prepared to talk. Linda faced me, having decided her path. "I've thought about it, and I still want to do this," she stated firmly. This was her final opportunity to reconsider. "Please, don't ruin our marriage for this guy. This is your last chance, and if you go through with it, you'll pay a heavy price," I warned her. Unwavering, she replied, "I'm going with Frank on Friday afternoon and we'll be back on Sunday. I hope we can move past this." Her choice was clear. She had chosen Frank over our marriage. I stood up, walked out of the room, and slammed the door to the guest room. My marriage was effectively over, and I was determined to take action. Thursday morning, after explaining to my boss at work that I needed time off from my impending divorce, I drove to Kansas City. I checked into the room Linda and Frank had reserved, setting up surveillance devices meticulously. I needed undeniable evidence for the divorce. After ensuring all devices were operational and well-positioned, I left, my thoughts heavy with the finality of my marriage's end. Before heading home, I made a stop at a gun store, purchasing a small can of pepper spray. This I planned to use to sabotage Linda and Frank's romantic date. At home, Linda attempted to engage with me, but I was dismissive, telling her to save her affections for Frank. Sleep was elusive that night, but I was resolute in my plans. Friday morning, I left early, finalizing divorce papers with my lawyer and ensuring Linda and Frank would be served on Monday. I was suing him for alienation of affection. Tracking Linda's movements via GPS, I discovered she was out getting her hair done. Seizing the opportunity, I tampered with the lingerie she planned to wear with Frank, applying pepper spray to strategic areas, anticipating the chaos it would cause. I then moved to secure my financial interests, closing joint accounts and cancelling shared credit cards. Around 12:30 p.m., I returned home, presuming Linda would be preparing for her rendezvous with Frank. As I entered her room, I found her clad in seductive lingerie I had once gifted her. Surprised, she attempted to cover herself. As Linda stood before me, her appearance was strikingly different from usual. Her hair was styled perfectly, makeup applied with precision, and she wore the lingerie I had given her, looking stunning. Yet, my heart was heavy with a mixture of emotions. "You sure look great. Too bad you don't put in this much effort for me," I commented, my words laced with a mix of admiration and bitterness. Linda tried to justify her actions, saying she just wanted to make a good impression. But I pointed out her apparent prioritization of Frank's opinion over mine, highlighting the shift in her affections. Despite her attempts at explanation, I couldn't overlook the betrayal. I approached her, taking her left hand in mine. As I slowly removed her wedding and engagement rings, my words were a mix of sorrow and finality. "I loved you, but you've broken my heart," I told her. The symbolism of removing the rings was not lost on either of us. It signified the end of our vows and our union. I pocketed the rings, releasing her hand. I issued a stern warning about not allowing Frank into our house, expressing my deep hurt and the extreme measures I was willing to take if she defied me. Linda assured me she wouldn't let him in. As I left, Linda called out to me, but I was resolute in my decision to walk away. Parking down the street, I observed as Frank arrived. Linda greeted him outside with a suitcase, sharing a long kiss before leaving with him. Her smug grin towards me only fueled my resolve. After they left, I returned home, changing all the locks and the garage door code. I then drove to Kansas City, checked into my room and set up my laptop linked to the surveillance cameras. The live feed showed Linda, already intimate with Frank. The images were a stark confirmation of her betrayal. Frank reappeared, and I couldn't help but notice the difference between him and what Linda was used to, a detail that brought a bitter chuckle. The feed continued, displaying the unfolding events of their tryst. As I watched the live feed, it became increasingly clear that Linda's romantic escapade was not meeting her expectations. Frank, ready for another round, approached her with eagerness, but his physical inadequacies were glaringly obvious. Linda, trying to be accommodating, reached for him, but her disappointment was palpable. It was evident she had made a poor choice. Frank was underwhelming in comparison to what she had left behind. Her expression shifted to one of frustration as Frank's efforts yielded brief, unsatisfying encounters. This turn of events, though painful in its context, offered a twisted kind of satisfaction. I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication as I observed Linda's growing dissatisfaction. Needing a break from the intense emotions, I stepped out for dinner and drinks, leaving the recording devices to capture every moment of their lackluster weekend. This evidence would not only bolster my case with the lawyer, but also serve as a stark reminder to Linda of her misguided decision. Upon returning, I saw that Frank had fallen asleep, and Linda's frustration had only deepened. Despite the initial pain of losing my wife, I found a strange comfort in witnessing the failure of her affair. As I lay in bed, thoughts of potential new relationships began to replace the anguish I had felt. The prospect of moving on and exploring new connections brought a sense of excitement and anticipation. The next morning, I woke up refreshed and ready to enact the next phase of my plan. After a leisurely breakfast and picking up some snacks, I returned to my room and placed an order with a local florist. I chose a bouquet similar to the ones I had given Linda on our anniversaries, a poignant reminder of what she was sacrificing. Timing the delivery for 11 a.m., I hoped to catch them at a vulnerable moment. Sure enough, as they were engaged in another intimate encounter, there was a knock at the door. The florist's arrival with the bouquet visibly unsettled Linda, her face a mix of pensiveness and anger. Shortly after, my cell phone rang. It was Linda calling. Our conversation was brief and tense. "Hello, how are you doing?" she asked, her tone laced with frustration and disappointment. The call further underscored the emotional chasm that had developed between us, a once loving relationship reduced to terse exchanges and simmering resentments. While sitting alone, my anger intensified with each passing moment as I thought about Linda with another man. Her unexpected call only added to my frustration. "My wife is out cavorting with someone else, and here I am, growing angrier by the minute," I retorted when she asked how I was doing. Linda's reason for calling caught me off guard. She had received a bouquet of flowers reminiscent of the ones I used to give her for our anniversaries. She was puzzled and wanted to know if it was from me. My response was bitter and sarcastic, reflecting my deep sense of betrayal. "If I had sent you flowers, they would have been ragweed with a card addressed to my cheating wife," I told her sharply. The stunned look on her face was apparent even through the phone. She tried calling back repeatedly after I ended the call, but I didn't answer. She shared the exchange with Frank, who naively reassured her that I would eventually get over it. Little did he know I was far from forgiving. Despite her emotional turmoil, Linda eventually gave in to Frank's advances. Seizing the opportunity to further disrupt their tryst, I ordered Linda's favorite pizza to be delivered to their room. The delivery's timing was impeccable, interrupting them mid-act. Frank, Frustrated, reluctantly paid for the pizza after the delivery person confirmed the details. They settled down to eat, but their peace was short-lived. As they started getting intimate again, I ordered Linda's favorite sandwich from a local shop, timing its delivery to once again disrupt their moment. Linda's realization dawned upon her as she saw the sandwich. She explained to Frank that I must have discovered their location, suspecting that I had hacked into her new email where the trip was mentioned. Realizing the extent of my interference, they decided to take a break and head out. Linda assured Frank of a more intimate evening later. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity and success of my interruptions. Upon their return, they got ready for their evening out. Linda, dressing in the sexy underwear I had sabotaged earlier, unknowingly put herself in for an uncomfortable surprise. Frank, oblivious to my tampering and enticed by her appearance, made his advances. The chaos of their disrupted weekend, the irony of my successful intrusions, and the impending end of my marriage brought a strange sense of relief and amusement, even amidst the pain of betrayal. After Linda and Frank left for their date, I sat back, eagerly anticipating the effects of my sabotage on her lingerie. My plan worked better than expected. About an hour later, they returned, and Linda immediately rushed to the bathroom, her body reacting painfully to whatever I had applied to her lingerie. She emerged with her skin red and irritated, clearly in discomfort, ensuring that Frank wouldn't get any further sexual satisfaction that night. Lying on the bed, Linda moaned in pain. When Frank tried to be intimate, she lashed out, attributing her discomfort to an allergic reaction to her new lingerie, unaware of my involvement. Seizing the opportunity, I spent time organizing the videos I had recorded and prepared DVDs for my lawyer and Frank's wife, ensuring I had everything I needed for the impending legal battles. Satisfied with my day's work, I went to bed, smiling at the chaos I had instigated in their weekend getaway. The next morning, I returned home, knowing Linda's return would only bring more turmoil. As expected, when Linda arrived home later that day, Frank didn't even bother to walk her to the door, merely letting her out of the car. I remained indifferent, absorbed in a football game, ignoring her announcement of her return. When she attempted to garner my attention with a seductive smile, I remained unimpressed and detached. "You're not dead," I remarked coldly, dismissing her attempt at reconciliation. Linda, seemingly shocked by my indifference, expressed her disbelief at my hardened attitude. "I never thought you were stupid. I did think that you loved me enough to get past this," she said, trying to justify her actions. But my response was firm and unyielding. "I loved you with all my heart, but that's in the past," I told her, making it clear that her decision to be with Frank, despite my pleas, had irreparably broken our bond. "Once you left with him, I didn't care if you came back or not." My words were a stark revelation to her, a confirmation that her actions had deeply wounded our relationship beyond repair. The love I once had for her was now overshadowed by betrayal and disillusionment. Linda, clearly desperate, pleaded for a chance to mend our relationship. She claimed she'd do anything to make up for her betrayal. In response, I made a crude suggestion, knowing well she wouldn't comply. It was a test of her so-called willingness to do anything, which she obviously failed. This further affirmed my belief that her promises were as empty as her vow of fidelity at our wedding. She expressed a desire to be intimate with me, claiming she needed me. I flatly rejected her advances. My trust and desire for her had been shattered by her actions. When she admitted to not using protection with Frank, my disgust only deepened. She tried to reassure me of Frank's cleanliness, suggesting we could use protection, but the very idea was repulsive to me. The woman who had chosen another man over her husband was now, in my eyes, damaged goods. I told her we could talk the next day after work, but in truth, I felt there was little left to discuss. The damage was done, the trust broken. I needed space and left for a nearby bar and grill to clear my head. Upon returning, I found Linda in my bed. I confronted her, insisting she had no right to be there after her infidelity. She tried to argue, claiming equal rights to the bed, but I was unyielding. Her actions had forfeited any such rights. Linda broke down in tears, but my resolve was firm. The trust and respect foundational to our marriage were irrevocably damaged. Her infidelity had not only broken our relationship, but also transformed the home we once shared into a battleground of hurt and betrayal. In the morning, the tension between Linda and me was palpable. As she prepared to leave for work, she looked at me, her eyes welling with tears, and professed her love. I responded coldly, emphasizing that I had loved her too, with a clear stress on the past tense. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she walked away. Once she left, I began the painful task of packing her belongings into garbage bags. During this process, I called Frank's wife, informing her of the affair between our spouses. Surprised and upset, she expressed interest in seeing the evidence I had collected. Upon meeting Frank's wife, I was momentarily taken aback by her stunning appearance, which I awkwardly acknowledged. We then focused on the matter at hand. After I explained the weekend's events, her fury matched my own. We agreed to visit my lawyer together, where she decided to initiate her own legal proceedings against Frank. The lawyer agreed to take her case and even offered a discount. After finalizing the legal details, Linda and I went for lunch. Once her paperwork was completed and signed, I dropped her off and returned home to await a call from my wife. As expected, my wife called in the afternoon, furious and confused about the divorce papers and the lawsuit against Frank. I calmly explained that these were the consequences of her actions. Despite her disbelief and anger, I remained resolute. Preparing for her return, I placed her packed belongings in the front yard. When she arrived, her fury was unbridled. I recorded her outburst, intending to use it as evidence for a restraining order. She raged incoherently, visibly overcome with emotion. Once she calmed slightly, we began what would be our final conversation. I confronted her about her betrayal, expressing the deep hurt and betrayal I felt. I explained that her actions, not mine, had led to the end of our marriage. Despite her protests of love, I made it clear that her lack of respect and love for me had irreparably damaged our relationship. The conversation was a painful but necessary closure to a chapter of my life that had been irreversibly altered by betrayal and heartache. In the midst of our heated exchange, Linda protested her love for me, but I was unyielding. "If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me with Frank," I retorted, referencing him dismissively as Little Frankie, due to what I'd seen on the videos. Her denial of the stark difference between our intimate moments and her weekend affair fell on deaf ears. Despite her protests and claims of love for only me, I pointed out the painful reality. She was now free to pursue anyone she desired. Yet, she insisted she wanted only me, a plea that seemed hollow given recent events. We moved inside to the kitchen table, a place laden with memories of our past together. This time, the conversation was different, tinged with the finality of our relationship's end. Linda questioned whether I would truly harm Frank, but my response was bitter. I explained how he had played a role in the destruction of our marriage and deserved consequences beyond legal repercussions. I also revealed that Frank's wife was unaware of his affair, thinking he was on a business trip and that she and I were now sharing a lawyer. Linda, still in denial, refused to believe that Frank had deceived his wife and that their plan to explore other partners was a lie crafted to seduce her. Her persistent disbelief and refusal to accept my perspective only cemented my decision to divorce. As the conversation continued, Linda seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. She realized that I had made up my mind to end our marriage the night she first told me about her plan with Frank. The hour I spent alone in the guest room that night was the turning point where I concluded that divorce was the only path forward. In that kitchen, where we had shared so many moments, we now sat in the shadow of a marriage broken by betrayal and mistrust, navigating the painful process of acknowledging its end. On Thursday, I had invested time in purchasing the necessary equipment to gather evidence and to gain access to Linda's email account. By Friday, I was at the lawyer's office, initiating the divorce proceedings. Linda, bewildered, asked why I hadn't warned her of my intentions, suggesting she would have ceased her actions. However, I doubted her sincerity, believing it would have only fueled her anger further. Despite her numerous assurances, her emails revealed a blatant disregard for my feelings, confirming my decision. I had held off on signing the divorce papers until the following Friday, as Linda prepared for her date. She expressed disbelief at her own naivety and inquired about the possibility of forgiveness. I admitted that, though I might forgive, I could never trust her again, unwilling to live in perpetual fear of her infidelity. As she broke down, I detailed my carefully considered resolution. Divorce was inevitable, and I intended to pursue retribution against little Frankie for his role in the demise of our marriage. I informed Linda that her credit cards were cancelled, but I had left half the checking account funds for her and removed my name from the account. The savings would be split, and while she could keep her car and personal belongings, she would be responsible for the car payments. In terms of our shared property, she was welcome to any needed furniture once she found a new residence. The house, however, remained mine, with the promise to split any proceeds if sold. This arrangement was all outlined in the divorce papers, and I warned that any contestation would lead to the release of the evidence I had gathered, potentially devastating her. Resigned, Linda accepted the terms, regretting her actions and wishing she could reverse them. I then offered a bitter jest about the difference between a cheating wife and a light bulb, which she didn't find amusing. It was time for her departure. Methodically, I placed her belongings in her car as she wept. The final item I handed her was her wedding ring, now flattened with a hammer, reducing it to mere scrap gold. With a farewell kiss on her forehead, I uttered my final words to her, "Goodbye, my love," and watched as she drove away, marking the end of our shared journey. I turned back to my empty house, not bothering to watch her leave. My vision was blurred by tears as a profound sense of loss overwhelmed me. For an hour, I wept, allowing my emotions to flow freely until exhaustion set in. It was a critical moment to reflect on my future and weigh my options. First, I considered drowning my sorrows in alcohol, but quickly dismissed it. I seldom drank and disliked the aftermath of inebriation. The second, darker option was to end my life, but I refused to grant her the satisfaction of seeing me defeated in such a way. The third and final option was to stand tall, recognizing that I was not at fault, and move on with my life. The thought of a future without Linda surprisingly brought a smile to my face. With newfound resolve, I called Linda's number. We planned to have dinner that evening, marking the beginning of my journey toward healing. Whether we ended up as friends or something more, I was open to the possibilities. Her image lingered in my mind, a symbol of hope and potential improvement in my life. In another chapter of my life, I faced a different kind of heartbreak. My ex, whom I had dated for a year, confessed 5 months in that she had been involved with another man when we started dating. She insisted her feelings for him were over and that she wanted to be honest with me. Despite my stance against cheating, I initially chose to end the relationship, fearing she might betray me too. However, after 2 weeks of no contact, she pleaded for another chance. Her charm and the ease of our relationship tempted me to give in. Months later, she planned a trip to her ex's town, igniting my suspicions. Confrontation led to her first display of anger in our otherwise harmonious relationship. A few days later, she ended things with me, citing my accusations. I accepted the breakup and maintained no contact, secretly hoping she might return with an explanation. Instead, she updated her social media with pictures of her and her ex, a direct blow to my heart. Despite my denial and longing for reconciliation, I refrained from reaching out. I was torn between the betrayal I felt and the positive memories we shared. The thought of getting back together lingered, even though I knew it wasn't right. Her actions deeply hurt me, and while I maintained no contact, part of me hoped she would unblock me and offer closure. In a different relationship, my intuition led me to uncover my boyfriend's infidelity. We'd met online and were in a long-distance relationship from the start due to his overseas job. Despite the distance, we had built a bond, but my instincts told me something was amiss. His actions and words didn't align, leading me to discover the painful truth of his betrayal. We were in a serious relationship, discussing marriage, and even his mother was involved. Our relationship had its ups and downs, but recently, there were more downs. I felt him pulling away, his behavior fluctuating between distant and affectionate. During this period, I started having a bad feeling, a nagging intuition that something was off. Acting on this feeling, I reactivated my dating app, only to discover he had updated his profile there. Instead of confronting him directly, I suggested we both delete our profiles as a couple's activity, but he refused. He claimed he didn't use the app and had forgotten his password. When I expressed my concerns, he became angry and abruptly ended our phone call, refusing to answer my attempts to reach out. Eventually, he calmed down and we talked a few days later. However, my intuition didn't subside. It led me to contact a girl we both knew on social media. Initially, she claimed they were just friends, but as our conversation continued, she confessed that he had been talking to her as if he was single. She revealed that he had become angry when she told him I had contacted her, hurling insults at both of us. She shared screenshots and details of their conversations, which mirrored the way he had pursued me, including promises of marriage. Shortly after this revelation, he called me. He sounded suppressed, angry, and irritated, asking if I had time to talk. The conversation was strained, with him accusing me of being crazy without explaining what I'd supposedly done. Abruptly, he ended our relationship, offering no explanation, just a brief goodbye. After the call, he immediately blocked me on all social media platforms. The shock of this betrayal was overwhelming, especially considering his maturity due to his age. It felt like I had narrowly escaped a bullet with someone who wasn't ready for a committed relationship. His reaction left me confused and seeking understanding. Thank you for joining us. If these stories resonated with you, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Stay tuned for more emotional journeys through the complexities of relationships. Your support is invaluable, and we look forward to sharing more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember that every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon.